Before we start with John, I just want to welcome Kathleen Schuler from the Health Legacy Project. Is that right? Okay, of the IATP. We're just asking our panelists to spend a little time telling us about what they do and their interests, and then we're going to John?
I'm with Hennepin County Environmental Services. We provide many services for Hennepin County, including managing solid waste and managing recycling and waste reduction programs. You are fortunate, if you live in Minneapolis, to have the trash lady watching over your trash and recyclables. We have worked together on a lot of very interesting recycling and waste reduction projects, and we're going to continue to do that. In general, you know, recycling and waste reduction is fairly simple. It's a no-brainer. There's nothing typically that technically difficult about it, but when you're dealing with the human animal, that's where the difficulty and the complication comes in. It's that when you hit that point of diminishing marginal returns is how do you get the people who typically aren't recycling to recycle, or people who are recycling about, maybe 70% of what they could, to do that last 30%, because over the roughly 1.5 million people that live in the county, that little 30%, 20%, 10% adds up. We're in the most populous county in the state. We have approximately 25% of the state's population is in Hennepin County. I believe I saw the figure, something like 70% of the business activity in the state occurs in Hennepin County. So, not surprisingly, we generate more trash than any place in the state. The counties are charged by the state to manage solid waste and to make sure that there are proper solid waste programs in place. So really, Hennepin County, if something was to go wildly out of whack with waste management in the county, we would be the ones responsible. We work with the municipalities. Some municipalities have very strong programs. Some municipalities don't have very strong programs. And we have approximately 45 municipalities in Hennepin County. Everything that ranges from Minneapolis to Hanover and Hassan Township, which you may not have been to. If you go to the western part of Hennepin, it's very rural. We have more, I think the third highest number of horses per capita nationwide in Hennepin. So they keep them on there. They keep them in there.
That's why they don't
in their fairly big lots in western Hennepin County.
One of the reasons that I moved to Minnesota to bring my horses to.
I
didn't end up in Hennepin County, but it's enormous.
It is. It's huge. And so the kind of demographics, the kind of programs, the kind of cities that we have in Hennepin County are just on a wide spectrum of difference. And then trying to put together programs that will work for Minneapolis and Hassan Township, can be kind of complicated. And the human animal is different in those areas in northeast Minneapolis versus Hassan Township. So that's where the complication comes in. Just to give you an idea of what we're dealing with in terms of waste, there's approximately 1.5 million tons of waste that's generated annually in the county. I think I don't. And there's, if you look at the total amount of recyclables and organics that go into our trash, it's a range. It ranges from, we did some waste composition studies over the last few years, 2 of them in Minneapolis, and then there was one in St. Louis Park and one in Minnetonka. That all of these were done within the last 4 years. And on the low end, there's about 60% of what people generate is either recyclable or compostable. On the high end, it's about 75%. So when you're looking about how much of our waste, at least 60% of what we generate is recyclable or compostable. When you look at, in those same waste studies, we looked at how much recyclables are going into the trash. It's anywhere from about 10% to 20% overall that's still going into the trash that could easily be separated for recycling. All of these cities where we did waste composition studies, they have very mature, very well-run curbside recycling programs. And they've been in place for years and years. And the educational materials have gone out there for years and years. So that's where the difficulty comes, is how do you get people to even care that 20% of the stuff they're throwing away could be really easily recycled, and there's lots of environmental benefits. And if they did a better job recycling this material, it might actually even have an impact on their overall waste bill, which amazingly people will go and show up in droves at City Council if their monthly fee for trash disposal goes up $2 a month or $1 a month. I mean, they will raise holy hell in a City Council meeting. They'll gladly pay, $80 a month for cell phone service, but if their trash bill goes up $1 per month, they're going to show up and fight City Hall. So there's all these complications into, how do you make this work? One piece is organics, and there's roughly 25 to 35% of what we throw away is compostable, and that's the part I'm going to talk about. But I just wanted to give you that background of, as we ask questions and so forth, about, well, what are you doing to make this happen? Like the city of Minneapolis, we also have a lot of different programs in place. There are county drop-off centers where you can drop off a lot of the materials that Susan mentioned can be put out either curbside or brought to the special drop-off centers in Minneapolis. So we do offer those kinds of services. We do work with cities on their curbside recycling programs, but then we also have we've been working on organics programs for about 8 years. Go to the next slide. Oh, one back. So just so everybody knows what we're talking about, organics are basically the biodegradable part of our trash that could be captured for either reuse or recycling. So it's all food scraps and then what we call soiled, non-recyclable papers, things like pizza boxes, napkins, paper plates, etc. Next slide, please. Oh, other way. Thank you. So why does the county even care about diverting organics, and why are we trying to grow this in the county? By state law, we're required to recycle 50% of the waste that's generated in the county. We've been at around 45% for many years. That in Hennepin, that amounts to about 100,000 tons more per year that needs to be diverted for recycling to get up to that 50% rate. Like I said, there's usually at least 30% of what people are generating across the board, residentially and commercially. About 30% of what's going in the trash is compostable. So this is by far the largest untapped segment of the waste stream that has a great potential for recycling, and we haven't really done a whole lot with it. We can keep trying to get people to put a couple more plastic bottles in, or a couple more cans, and we'll get little blips, or we could go after the big gorilla in the corner of the room that nobody wants to deal with. So that's what we started doing about 8 years ago. Next, please. So over the last 8 years, we've been working with schools, with cities. We have some county facilities on board, and then also some commercial facilities. And we now have more than 100 schools that are separating organics. The Minneapolis public schools got on board last school year. There's now 25 Minneapolis schools that are separating organics, and there's supposed to be another 20 this year that come on board. Residentially, there's 5,000 households, including the pilots going on in the city of Minneapolis. And I do want to back up and mention that the city of Minneapolis was vital in getting these programs started at the schools. At the time when we started 8 years ago, no other hauler wanted to touch this stuff. So we came to Susan and said, Susan, we got a proposal for you. And fortunately, the city of Minneapolis was willing to help us collect the organics from these pilots, and still collects from many schools, probably from about 45 schools. and it's been incredibly beneficial for getting this started in Hennepin County, for getting interest at the state level, getting schools in other counties interested, and this is just super hot, and without a vital role played by the city of Minneapolis, that would have never happened. County facilities now, we have 5 county facilities that are on board, and we have, this is old, this is probably closer to about 75 or 100 commercial facilities that are separating their organics for composting, many of which are in the city of Minneapolis. Next slide, please. So why should businesses bother with doing this? And I left this slide, and it's the same thing for cities. What are some of the incentives in place for separating out organics? One is that, huge one, is avoided taxes. Garbage is, there's a county solid waste fee and a state solid waste tax that applies to trash. If you separate out a material for recycling, it's tax exempt. So whatever, whether it's cans, bottles, or organics. That works like a sales tax. It's a bottom line kind of tax that drops to the bottom of the entire bill. So for a business, that's 31.5% additional tax that they could save quite a bit on for either recycling cans or bottles or organics, whatever. We have a reduced tipping fee for organics. That's $15 a ton versus $45 a ton for trash. So there's a $30 difference there, which is another incentive. And if you can divert a whole lot of your waste, you should be able to reduce your level of trash service. So instead of having a dumpster picked up 5 times a week, maybe it's 3 times a week or 2 times a week. There's environmental benefits of not having that truck come around, and you could also save some money. Next slide, please. I'm not going to run through these. Again, it's not that hard to set up these programs. Here's a really super nice sorting station where you can separate out recyclables, trash, and organics. It's fairly simple to do. If anybody wants help doing it, we're more than willing to help you do it. Next slide, please. But what I wanted to show you is, a lot of people say, well, what really happens with this material? So I have, my final slides are mostly just showing you what happens, that it really does get composted. A lot of people think, well, I put it in there and it just goes away. They've probably really taken it down to the burner and burning it, and they're saying that they're collecting it for composting. It starts by properly sorting the material. This is one of the posters that we make available for free to anybody who wants them. So first, you have to get clean organics, and clean organics look just like trash. People are there like, really? Yeah, really. It's just has all the compostable stuff in it. And it just so happens, by coincidence in this photo, that the stuff in this can almost perfectly matches this poster, which we did not stage. It's from a school. So you properly sort it. Next. It comes to our transfer station in Brooklyn Park. Most of the organics collected in Hennepin County come to our transfer station because we have the lower tipping fee of $15, and then we transfer it to the compost site. So we inspect it, make sure it looks good. This is a school load. You can see lots of milk cartons in there, and yes, there's lots of pizza that are served at our schools. Next, please. Then it goes to the composting site where it has to get mixed with other things to get the right ratios of carbon and nitrogen, and you have to get bulky materials so you get airflow through the pile. Usually the organics is mixed with yard waste and brush. Next. Then it cooks. It cooks for anywhere from about 3 months to 6 months, depending on the time of year. And after it goes through that initial cooking phase, then you have to let it rest or cure, and the biological activity will actually slow down. The heat of the pile will go down. If you put it on your lawn at the point where it looks like good black compost immediately, all those microbes are still working really hard, and they would actually suck the nutrients out of your soil to keep being able to do their thing versus putting the nutrients back in once they've calmed down. Next slide. Then